everybody. I pray you had a blessed week. I have been making a lot of shave sets here lately, and I made sure that I recorded this one because it's got some really cool coloring in it. It's ocean colors that someone had requested. And I have a mold with some maple scraps in it towards the bottom for the shave bowl. The one that's other bowl that's the same size towards the top is the lid, and then the two other molds are my chocolate molds I got from Walmart. I'm filling the inside and outside right now with all the same color. So I just mixed 2 greens and 2 blues, light and dark, and a white, and so a total of 5 colors together. They're all pearly colors, ocean colors, and the swirl in this just turned out amazingly cool, and I probably couldn't replicate it if I wanted to. The way it turned out was great. Also, in my shave handle molds, which are the chocolate molds I got from Walmart, I have stuffed some scrap pieces of maple inside of those as well. The other pieces I had hot glued to the side of the container so they wouldn't float, because I knew that they would, and being I wasn't going to fill them up all the way, there was no way for me to really keep them down. The one shave set with that little piece of wood in there, or the handle, it wanted to float, so I just taped it down, put a rubber band, threw everything all in the pressure pot for, this probably stayed in more than 24 hours because I couldn't get to it right away. But at 50 psi, I usually fill mine up to 60 because it loses air. It has a slow leak in it. So it usually just slowly leaks down, and by the time I come out about a day later, it's at between 20 and 30 psi, which is plenty enough to get the air bubbles out. I don't stress or fret over it too much because, I haven't had an issue with getting air bubbles, to be gone in it or anything. I haven't had issues yet. So I hot glued it to a waste block so that way I can turn a mortise in the part where it will be hollowed out. And the reason why I had to do that is because I didn't cut the wood away from the top lid, and I needed a way to get it off. And I did try to sand it off, but accidentally jammed it into my sander belt and ripped my sander belt. So it slipped out of my hand actually when I went to go press it against the sander, and it ripped. So things happen. I'm measuring just to make sure that to give myself a visual on how big the pot actually needs to be for the shaving soaps. The great thing about some soaps is, especially if you get a vegetable glycerin or glycerin-based soap, they can be melted in the microwave. Obviously, in a glass container, you don't want to put your shaving pot in the microwave. They can be melted and then put into whatever container you like, and utilize whatever size. I try to make them the size of the standard pucks that you can buy, and I think that's like 2.5 inches. Sometimes they're 3 inches. It all depends. So my outside bowl, I try to make at least between 3.25 and 3.5 inches. This one ended up being a little on the large side, just because of how I shaped it. I kind of bellowed it out in the center and then brought it in narrower towards the bottom and the top. Just a pretty simple shape, nothing too fancy spancy. I wanted to make sure that enough of the wood was seen, but because of how awesome these swirls came out, I wasn't minding so much that there wasn't so much wood sticking out because the resin just looked really cool, and I couldn't replicate that if it saved my life. So I wanted to show that off especially. And the outside of the piece, I'm adding sanding sealer right now because I didn't use CA glue on the outside of the piece, just the inside where the moisture would be. I did sand this to 3000 grit and then used the NOVUS plastic polish. I just used the fine. If you buy the kit, it comes with the fine, the medium scratch, and then also a spray cleaner slash polish stuff, which I use all 3 of those. So the link for the description the link for those items is in the description below if you'd like to purchase. And I do get credit for you utilizing my links, so I really appreciate that. Now for the inside of the pot, because I was going to coat it with CA glue really good to seal it, it wasn't necessary for me to sand all the way to 3000. I wasn't going to get a polish with it on the inside like the outside with doing it that way. So I think I only sanded to like 800, maybe even 600, just to give it a real good smooth finish, so I can, when I put the CA glue, it just glides on. I used some thin CA glue to kind of seal the wood, kind of act like as a stabilizer in there, because it was very punky. Plus, some of these pieces are turned on the end grain side, so I'm turning them end grain. And as always, I put these ridges in the very bottom of the bowl, so that way the soap, once it gets wet, it has something to kind of like anchor into, so it doesn't slide around. I'm sure it'd be very frustrating to have your soap flopping around in there while you're trying to get lather. So I try to keep that in mind, and you can put anything in there. If you have a decorative, you know, a Robert Sorby decorative tool, that would work perfect too. Just something to give it grip, the soap to grip to. So I put the first couple coats on, and of course you get little ridges with CA glue. Anybody who does pens knows that how easily you can get these ridges. And it's okay, because I'll do the first couple coats, sand it back a little bit, and then do my final couple of coats. And plus you can kind of see if you need more, because after you sand it, you see where there's a need. It's hard to explain, but there's just spots in it where it looks like it just needs to have more glue. And then I cut that back with the Satilla abrasive paste. I love that stuff. It's nice and smooth. Then I just take the Frenchies polish and put it all over the piece to give it a nice final shine. Frenchies polish isn't really necessary. It's a shaved brush, and you know, it's going to get wet and all that. I think it's not going to hurt it any to be on there, but it wouldn't hurt anything to not be on there. It's just, I guess, more for me to say, hey, look, okay, final shine, and then there you go. It's not as a durable finish as the CA glue. I definitely recommend doing CA glue, or if you want to, you can use like a tablespoon worth of resin to coat it all with, and that would be perfect. I just needed my lathe for other projects, so I didn't want to wait for the CA glue, or not the CA glue, the resin to dry on there. I also use mineral oil with my wood and resin pieces, because the wood I use is not stabilized. So it keeps the wood from swelling while you're sanding, and you're able to still wet sand. Just make sure if you do use mineral oil to sand, and you plan on putting any kind of finish on it later that you know, requires it to not have oil, like lacquer or even the CA glue, you want to use denatured alcohol to clean that oil off really good, so that a way it doesn't cause anything from not adhering any surface. So I cut a mortise in the bottom of the lid, because I want to be able to turn it around and turn it without having to put my shaving bowl back on the lathe. This piece of wood is actually facing end grain, and it's punky, so I just used some thin CA to help kind of seal it up really good, kind of, you know, poor man stabilize it, I guess, and give it a good coat of that before I sanded it. And I only sanded to about 400, and then put the about 4 coats of the medium CA glue is what I used, and that did just fine. It coated it plenty. I probably could have just done, you know, 2, but I wanted to be extra sure. So I used the Satilla abrasive paste to knock that off back, and then the Frenchies polish to give it just a nice shine. The Frenchies polish isn't necessary. It doesn't do anything as far as durable finish or anything. What you want to do, make sure, is that you use CA glue or some sort of water tight finish on there, so you so your wood doesn't swell when the person uses it for shaving. I'm looking into a product called Waterlocks, and I think it is a polyurethane, water-based polyurethane, watertight finish. Only read very little about it, but if there's anybody that is watching that uses the product on things that need a more of a watertight finish, let me know in the comment section below if you used it. It's called Waterlocks. I can't remember the name of the company, but I know it comes in like a red-orange can. I haven't ordered any yet because it is quite expensive, and I'm still debating on if it would be applicable for these particular projects that I need a watertight finish for. So if anybody has used it on, you know, stuff like this, or uses it for any other application that's going to have something that's going to get wet quite a bit, just let me know, and I'll see if it's something that I can add to my arsenal. So on the outside of the lid, I put about 4 or 5 coats, and the reason why 4 or 5 is because the swirl in the center, the turning in the center, it kept building up ridges. So I had to sand it back just a little bit to get those ridges out, and then of course wipe it going the opposite direction, up and down versus, you know, just around and around to get those ridges out. And then I knocked that back with the Satilla wood abrasive paste, which is really fine and it works really great for resin especially. And then just a coat of Frenchie's polish to give it a nice glowy shine, I should say, because it was shiny before. It's just that, like I said, the Frenchie polish just gives it that final nice gloss. Now for my shaving handle, I messed it up. As you can see here, I'm drilling out a resin fill hole because my first time drilling it, it drilled, I think my chuck may be holding one of the teeth inside the chuck is bent, and it is drilling things crooked. It just wants to wobble all around in there. I even had a hard time hand doing the threads for my thing to fit, and as you can notice, it's sitting in there a little wobbly. So I probably need to get a new chuck for drilling. And the last one I did, I had that problem, but it wasn't as bad, and this time it just really officially just drilled it all crooked. Oh, I was so upset. So I just filled it with some 15-minute epoxy and waited about an hour or two, and I was able to stick it back on the lathe and turn it. Thank goodness for epoxy. I'm just shaping it. I usually go on Pinterest to look at shaving brush styles and designs to get some ideas of how I want to shape them. Some of the pictures I find on there have measurements too, so you can kind of get an idea how tall or how big around it is. I usually just go by the feel, and then that's that. My brushes I used to purchase on Amazon, but the seller no longer sells them on there. So this next batch that I have, they're all synthetic. They're from China, yes, I know, and they're from AliExpress, and I'll put the link for those in the description below. First time I did this, I actually glued my shaving handle to my mortise to taper. So I learned, and now make sure you just put tape on there before you start adding your finish, because you'll end up gluing it on there like I did, and you know, struggling to get that off. So I'm using the NOVUS plastic polish. I did 1 and 2 because I did have some ridges from putting the CA glue on, and I just wanted to knock those back nice and even, and it gave it a really nice polish and shine. And then a Frenchie's, which, you know, isn't necessary, but gives it a nice shiny finish. I only put 1 coat on it, and it was just perfect. So if you're interested in shaving pucks for your shaving sets that you make, or for yourself or a friend or family, Carden Farms soap. I picked up some of this from our local fair, and it smells so yummy. It feels so good on your skin. I love it. It's local in North Carolina, not local for me, but North Carolina, and I'll put all the information in the description below for that, so you can order some. But thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful week, and God bless.